Right, chaps, let's carry on with the news. Talking about Washington blaming people for failing to influence the coup in Niger. And this, of course, comes amid the many people that the French have blamed for the coup in Niger, including China, Russia, anyone who's looked at France the wrong way, anyone but France, Okay, the US has invested $500 million in training Niger's army and building the largest drone bases in all of Africa. Now those bases could be taken over by a new power, which would mean a military disaster for the US. One of the rebel generals was even trained in America, but is now pursuing anti-Western policies. Now, I wonder if this is a bit of a slight at the French, actually, because as far as I'm aware, the French were supposed to be keeping the Nigerians in check and haven't, according to, the Americans. So I wonder if there are some problems in paradise, as we say. And in actual fact, the Americans are a bit annoyed with the French for all of this because they've invested a lot of money into Niger, probably very much in line with what the French have told them they can do. And in actual fact, that's yet another failed investment that is not going to return anything. And last I heard, the Nigerians had in fact taken at least one of these bases. But again, if you're going to keep a country in that low, a state, if people are going to keep people in poverty, only 14% of people had access to electricity in Niger. These are people who are mining every day uranium for French and other European energy needs. Then you know what? This is going to happen. The change of power in Niger also caught the French by surprise. How? After what happened in Mali, as now they will be deprived of uranium for their nuclear power plants. Secretary of State Blinken initially agreed to support the idea of Nigeria invading Niger, but the State Department recognises that this is unlikely. What a shame that we can't get the black men to fight the other black men on our behalf. How dreadful. I mean, it worked so well with the Slavs, didn't it? These people are awful. For now, Nigeria has cut off electricity exports to Niger, which is actually a completely ridiculous own goal for Nigerians because they dam a river coming from Niger, which could be cut from them. The ousted president has promised the US to charge his phones, but if communications with him are cut off, it will be the end of Western rule in the country. Wow. The Niger story is instructive. The US is no longer able to tear itself apart, trying to simultaneously pressure China, go to war with Russia, and contain its retreat from Africa and Latin America. Making matters worse is the split in Washington, where they can't even appoint diplomats to many countries. What will happen in the midst of a chaotic election with Trump's criminal cases and Biden's corruption scandals when America will not care about foreign policy at all? Quite. It is a recipe for disaster, what's going on in the American political system at the moment. It truly is. And we have Chinese and Russian warships approaching Alaska, because Alaska's Russian. But I think that this is very much a warning sign to the Americans. There was a drone that tried to fly over Black Sea airspace a couple of days ago, which was approached by Su-25 fighter jet, and swiftly turned on its heels and went back from whence it came. And I think that we will be seeing more of this pressure and reminder to the Americans that it is not just them who have the power to invade another country's airspace or sea space, that actually the Russians and the Chinese can come in as well. The head of the British General Staff revealed the initial strategic plan of the Ukrainian counteroffensive. Well, this should be good. British Admiral Tony Radakin told reporters what Ukraine's strategy was at the beginning of the counteroffensive: to starve, stretch, and then strike. Wow, considering the Russian army is stronger now than it was in 2022, I would say that starving has not worked. The stretching also doesn't seem to have worked, and every time they strike, they fail unless they're, lobbing cluster munitions into Donetsk or blowing up bridges with young families on them. So I would say that the Ukrainian strategy has very much failed, and maybe it's time for a new one, perhaps one based on diplomacy rather than this. This guy, Robin Brooks, Institute of International Finance chief economist, he looks like an absolute bellend, has come on Bloomberg and told us that Ukraine has the right to set its own price caps for Russia and, rename Russia, change the Russian flag, decide who should live in Crimea, etc., etc. The list of idiocy goes on. This is Mr. Zelensky scrawling Slava Ukraini on a French long-range Scalp air-to-ground missile. I would think the French would want to keep their long-range missiles. Perhaps. But here he is, signing some good old Nazi slang on the side there, ready to send it into a school or, wherever else they decide to bomb this week. Today marks the anniversary of the Hiroshima bombings, and I think that picture really does say all that it needs to. I have a really harrowing video of Japanese people talking about why the Americans needed to drop a nuclear bomb on them and why it was the right thing to do, which I'll upload after this video. Needless to say, the brainwashing in Japan has been fairly successful in putting the Americans in a position of greatness. Niger is a major uranium supplier to the EU, making up 25.4% of the share. But I think it's worth mentioning that 16.9% of this is Russia, which is sanctioned by the EU, so that will be either far more expensive or something that they just can't access. And Kazakhstan is also, I believe, starting to receive sanctions. I can see Niger, which is obviously unfriendly to the EU now. Kazakhstan and Russia and Uzbekistan are all far more pro-Russia than they are pro-EU. And I would think that that makes up the majority of this little graph here. Yes, it's going to be a cold winter Europe. Prepare if you can. Japanese exports to Georgia and to Kazakhstan have spiked along with the latest round of sanctions that Japan has got involved in towards Russia. Shocking that, isn't it? I wonder where these exports are going from these countries. I'm fairly sure that Kazakhstan and Georgia are both getting richer from this, by the way. Niger is preparing to repel military invasion and seems to still have vast amounts of public support. It's calling on the citizens to be ready to defend the motherland and the independence of the country. Again, this is an existential threat for Niger. They will not back down to Western demands. And on that subject, Wagner has opened a centre in Niger, which I think will probably be quite useful in the coming days. European companies have suffered a 100 billion hit from Russian operations after the sanctions. Russia is the one spreading false information about Koran burnings to harm NATO bids, says Sweden. The Ukrainians have made this ridiculous film about America. I'll post it after this video. And basically this is putting the blame for the failed counteroffensive firmly on the hands of the Americans. Thank you for watching. Please do follow my channel. Diplomacy is free. God